Hi, my name is Anthony and I'm a student in Centennial's game development program. For this video, we're going to be going over multi-purpose mechanics, their value in game design, and how Splatoon effectively utilizes them to create an intuitive gameplay experience. So, what is a multi-purpose game mechanic? While the term itself is far from official, it can be used to describe a video game mechanic that skillfully blends multiple other mechanics or systems into a single, seamless mechanic. Have you ever started a new game only to find yourself with a headache trying to understand a billion different convoluted systems and mechanics? A feeling like there's just so many things to learn, like there's just too much to wrap your head around? It's unfortunately a very common experience. This, though, is where multi-purpose mechanics can really shine, and shoulder a lot of that tutorialization. When done right, a good multi-purpose mechanic can provide depth or complexity in a game, while keeping everything simple and easy for players to understand. After all, one mechanic that does a variety of things is easier to understand than a bunch of separate mechanics. One thing is easier to understand than multiple things. That's the base principle behind multi-purpose mechanics. Though, since this type of mechanic is rather challenging to design, there aren't many notable examples of multi-purpose mechanics that combine more than 2 or 3 mechanics into one. However, there is one extremely notable and well-executed example: Splatoon's ink. If you've never played Splatoon before, it's a 4v4 competitive multiplayer shooter by Nintendo, where players spray colorful ink everywhere. Splatoon's primary game mode, Turf War, has 2 teams compete to try and cover as much ground in their ink as possible. The genius of this design lies in the ink. This is our multi-purpose mechanic. Ink combines several traditional shooter mechanics and systems into one. Quite a number of them, in fact. Ink serves as the player's ammunition, reload condition, attack, movement, and stealth mechanic, as well as the win condition and objective. Since this mechanic is extremely well designed, all of these different mechanics and systems naturally combine into one mechanic that is super easy to understand. And this is one of the biggest reasons for Splatoon's mass appeal. It's a shooter that anyone can understand. But let's dive a little deeper, and let's explore how ink creates solutions for each of these different mechanics. To start out, movement in Splatoon is all about ink, with players having 2 forms to take on in battle: Kid form and Squid form. Each of these forms have different strengths and weaknesses, mainly related to movement. As a Kid, players have a base walking speed and cannot run or sprint, but they can lay down ink. Once the space is inked, players can move through it as a squid, which allows them to swim at high speeds. Anything you can ink, you can swim on, and this does include walls. Spray some ink onto a wall and swim up it to obtain high ground. Not only does this mechanic very easily communicate where the player is safe to move to, it's also extremely flexible and allows for the level design to flourish and provide extremely varied play spaces with lots of verticality and height. It's also worth noting that many maps have interactive objects that assist in movement, which all are activated by ink. Ink rails are airborne paths that you can swim through. Shooting the node will activate the rail in the color of the ink that touched it, allowing only players of that color to ride the rail. Sponges are a little different. They are already pre-assigned ink colors. Players of the matching color can shoot them to fill them with ink and grow them, allowing them to be swimmed up. Opposing players can shoot to shrink them, removing the movement option for the enemy team. Now, because you'll need to lay down ink wherever you move if you want to move effectively, your movement can be very easily telegraphed to your opponent. A quick glance at the map can show the current state of all the ink on the stage in real time. If they see a trail of enemy ink heading toward them, they'll know for sure that an opponent is approaching them. therefore giving them time to react. However, there are ways to circumvent this, and it's where ink as a stealth mechanic comes into play. When turning into a squid and diving into your ink, moving around will create an easily visible trail that shows a player is swimming, and this trail is visible to enemies. However, staying completely still while submerged in ink will render you effectively invisible to the enemy team. This technique, dubbed sharking by the community, is an extremely powerful stealth tool that can change the tide of battle. All you need is the smallest little puddle of ink in order to submerge, something easily missable to the opponent. Wait for an enemy to walk by and pop out to finish them off before they can even react. With the addition of the Ninja Squid gear ability, you can even remove the trail effect while swimming to maximize your stealthy tactics. It's an extremely dynamic and fun stealth mechanic, and all of it is just a natural byproduct of the larger ink mechanic. And because of this, the player immediately understands how it works, with barely any explanation needed. In addition to movement and stealth, ink is also used as ammunition in Splatoon, and it's the way you deal damage to your opponents. Step into enemy ink and you'll slow to a crawl and take damage over time. You also cannot use squid form in enemy ink. Take enough damage and you'll be splatted, creating an explosion of enemy ink. Don't worry, you'll respawn very quickly. While shooting, you'll have to pay attention to your ink tank, which can be seen on the back of your inklet. This is essentially your ammo meter. Once it's depleted, you won't be able to shoot. Fortunately, by using squid form and diving into your ink, you'll refill your ink tank while submerged. This makes sure that both forms are integral to the core gameplay, as you need to use squid form to gain ink, and use kid form to shoot it. Now, when we're dealing with ink as a projectile and main attack method, a few interesting properties are applied to every projectile in the game in order for it to function correctly. For one, every projectile ever shot needs to hit the ground. This is necessary for being able to actually paint the map. This means that every single projectile in Splatoon is affected by gravity. Hit scan weapons do not exist here. No weapon can have unlimited range or an instantaneous projectile, even snipers. Some weapons even lean further into gravity, like sloshers, giant buckets of ink. Since this projectile is wide and heavy with far reach, it can be used to damage enemies over ledges or in spots where they cannot damage you, or even see you. Another thing ink does is serve as map control. This is a little bit more of an abstract concept compared to the other systems, as it basically just means which areas of the map are safe or unsafe at any given time. This is a concept that exists in every other multiplayer shooter already. If the enemy team has pushed up, they are controlling the area around them, making it relatively unsafe for one person to wander in. The enemies will notice, and since you're in a disadvantaged position, they will make quick work of you. Ink does this very same thing with one key difference: visualization. I said map control was an abstract concept before, but that was only mostly true. Splatoon's ink takes this abstract concept that would usually require many hours of learning and understanding the game to have a grasp on, and turns it into an immediately and extremely accessible, easy to see representation of it. Enemies already need to paint the ground they walk on to traverse it effectively, as I mentioned before. Doing this quite literally paints every spot they have control over in a bright color, and it's all visible from the map screen. Which spaces of the map are safe or unsafe at any given time can be quite effectively summed up with my color good, their color bad. I mentioned Splatoon's mass appeal earlier, and this only further lowers the bar to entry, allowing for anyone and everyone to quickly and easily grasp this concept that would be considered advanced in other titles. But the last major thing ink does is arguably what it's most famous for, being the main win condition and objective. Winning in Turf War means painting as much of the map in your color as possible. You get 3 minutes to sling as much ink as you can. This is the cherry on top of everything else ink accomplishes. It ties everything together to make sure that no matter what you're doing, you're contributing to the objective. I already mentioned Splatoon's mass appeal twice beforehand, but this is arguably the biggest reason Splatoon can captivate such a broad audience. As long as you're firing your weapon, you're contributing. It makes it so that even the smallest of children can pick up a controller and have fun, without being such a detriment to their team. It's such a genius main objective that ties everything you're constantly doing together to try and provide a non-stop fun experience. When the first Splatoon game dropped in 2015, it was absolutely nothing like the shooter genre had seen before. It was such a breath of fresh air to have a bright, colorful, expressive shooter where the goal is to paint the map in bright colors in an era of increasingly gray and brown, muddy, realistic shooters. Now, we've covered a lot, so let's recap quickly. Ink is a multi-purpose mechanic. It covers movement, stealth, ammunition, map control, and a win condition. And it does all of these things with such a high degree of elegance, making it instantly easy to understand. I can move where my ink is, so of course I need to lay down more to move effectively. The enemies can only see my swim trail, so of course if I couldn't, I could hide. I can't step in enemy ink, so of course that area is unsafe. All the player needs to be taught is at a basic level how ink works. The rest comes intuitively. And this is the biggest advantage of multi-purpose mechanics. It makes tutorialization effortless. The understanding of one concept naturally leads to the understanding of many other concepts without much extra work. It leads to a significant increase in accessibility, and is just overall an extremely positive thing to have in a game. And that is the power of a good multi-purpose mechanic. This about wraps up the video, so thanks for listening. I hope you've learned something interesting today. If you're into game design, I recommend checking out the channel below and looking at all the other videos. These are videos by my peers, and if you're into game design, I think you'll get a kick out of all of them. Thanks, and goodbye!